Okay, first, can you just tell me who you are?
My name is Marina Abramović. I am an artist who work in different medias, but specified very much on performance art. So using my body as my main material for working. Now give me this. I want to tell this part. If you ask me the question, who is Jonas Mekas, this is something coming to my mind, and I really have to read to you. He is visionary, intelligent, poetical, dangerously seductive, simple, complicated, generous, charismatic, pure, honest, humorous, politically incorrect joker, great filmmaker, and the most important, the wonderful human being. That's Jonas. Purity, exactly what he was. You know, there is something about him. You know, how he see the world through the eyes. You know, it's very difficult to keep innocence when you're old, and to see the eyes as a child for the first time. And he had this quality to do that. I didn't see him change. He was as childish, as shy, as innocent, as pure, you know, as he was ever. And I think somehow getting old, he become more mischievous. There is more fun to it. There is more joy. And he learned. He understands temporality of life. He understands that we are here, you know, in short time. The human beings. He understands, you know, beginning and end. Yes, you go older, you get wiser. I interviewed once a very old woman in Brazil. She was 120 when I interviewed. She died the year later. And I asked her, what is the most important thing in life? And she said two things: how to enter and how to exit. And I think Jonas knew both ways.
So I'm curious, how did you two first meet?
You know, in 1978 is the first time I came to anthology, film anthology, which was at that time in Worcester Street. And I was invited to go there together with my friend, Jonas. And we both have the dogs. And I was saying, you know, it's possible. I'm sure it's not possible, but it's possible to bring the dogs there. I said, sure, I always go with my dog, Sappho, to see the films. So we both, and I had Albanian Shepherd, which is a pretty big dog. So we both went there to see the Maya Deren uncut the files of the films. It was a wonderful evening, and the dogs was in the first row, and we all sit there and look the movies. And after this, she introduced me to Jonas Mekas, and this is the first time I met him. You know, we're talking early 70s in New York. He was so bohemian, so easygoing, simple, uncomplicated, and you know, he had this little smile on his face, and the most important for me was the sparkling eyes. There was something with eyes that was so full of joy, and always little sparkling, little lights like flashing in. And I immediately liked him, but also the fact that he come from Lithuania and I come from ex-Yugoslavia, it was very, you know, similar DNA in that we can really connect very easily.
How did you become friends over time?
It's, you know, it's just because of the work connect us. You know, he was working and I was doing my performances, and he was always interested in everything new and interesting. You know, he showed the first time ever Jack Smith movies, and it was such an avant-garde time at that time. Nobody even was questioning it was art at all. So he was really, you know, on the frontier, and my work was very frontier too. So through the work, we actually start knowing each other and respecting each other's work. We never had actually heavy conversations about art. We always have, exchanging the jokes, because everything was about humor. We really, I think we we didn't need to talk about, because each of us knew, what they are doing. But what we had connection is the humor. And the humor was so important, and I think still today, if you think what's happening now in the reality where we are living now, the humor is somehow gone. We have to go give back humor to everything. And in his work was lots of humor.
There's this great scene of you and Jonas in the beginning of Sleepless Night Stories, where you're at a cafe and you're telling him about a recent break. Do you remember that moment? I'm wondering if you could tell us the story of what was happening in that moment.
Oh, this was my breakup with my husband. And this breakup was so difficult for me because I almost have a, I really had broken heart. And just because of that breakup right now, I made this opera called Seven Deaths of Maria Callas, because she died from broken heart and I almost died from broken heart. So I identified this story with her. So I was telling him about broken heart. I think that was the moment. And really kind of pulling my emotions to him. And he was the right person to understand what I was going through, because I could tell him anything and he could understand completely. And he always have these twinkling eyes, that always there is a little bit of smile and humor, but also warmth and love, which is beautiful. And he was a good listener, and I could really pour my heart to him. We was always trying to say the most incorrect jokes to each other, but we forget them. And by the way, the time right now, you can't even tell political joke without consequences. You can't talk about joke about anything. You can't talk about, it's very difficult. Especially we like the jokes who are truth. The joke really is a true joke. There is a political things, but the truth.
So a lot of people we're interviewing were influenced by Jonas, but I see you almost as peers, like pioneers, in different mediums. Do you think that's correct?
Yeah, this is correct. Jonas Mekas was very important for discovering for me somebody who I consider like my grandfather, in a huge amount of inspiration. It was Parajanov. This was in the 80s. He made the entire viewing of all week of Parajanov movies, start with Pomegranate, and so on and so on. And I never saw Parajanov before. And I remember coming and looking at Parajanov and could not believe, because the aesthetic, the idea, the way how to tell the story, the rituals, all the Slavic elements that I have in my work, I could recognize in Parajanov. So this was for me incredible gift that Jonas gave to me, discovering Parajanov for me.
Do you think that there's a connection between avant-garde film and performance art?
Oh, definitely. I think they are like the brother and sister, together going to historically, because somehow they happen in the same time. It's filmmaker had a different vision how to see the reality, and performance art have also different vision to see the reality. They're using different tools, but results are similar. Art is placed for so many different things. If we just say that the political art is the only right art, I will not agree with this, because that will be like, you're reacting on the political news of the day, and next day is old news, so your work will not exist. The good art have to have so many layers of meaning. Good art have to be and political and social and dealing with community and the spiritual, and also the most important, the good art have to predict the future. And if you have all these components, then the one piece of art have many lives. And the very important work of art to have many lives, not just when it's happening, but generations to come, and to discover new elements of that work if they have so many structures inside. To lift human spirit. That's the only purpose that I see that is noble and worth living for, is to lift human spirit, not to put your spirit down. It's so easy to put human spirit down, and it's about lifting. I'm always fascinating about in the time when Second World War, where all the artists was really reflecting the war with atrocity and the killing and the pain and suffering of the nations. And you know what Matisse was painting? Entire Second World War, he was painting flowers. And look what he was doing. Jonas lost his life. He was looking to nature. First of all, my main question, why you think you're an artist? And if they answer me they want to become an artist, I send them home. Because you can't become an artist. You are or you're not. It's in your DNA. Creating art is like a necessity of breathing air. You wake up in the morning with ideas and you have to make them. It's as strong as a breathing. And if you do that, you're an artist. But becoming is not possible. You can learn the technique, you can learn lots of different things about, how to do things. But becoming, you have it into yourself. And then you have to follow your heart, you have to follow your intuition, you have to not look into the trends, you have to look deep inside yourself to become universal for everybody else. And you have to sacrifice. And it's lonely life. And it's not easy. And if you want all of that, then just go and do it. You can't change. You can't divide this. It's like you actually, entire you being, it's inside that. There's no one molecule of you who is outside. Life and art is just together.
The post-war generation seemed to, Jonas's generation seemed to be really impacted by what they had experienced. Do you think that that's a correct read? Was there like a reaction to sort of that existential crisis that generation was going through?
I think Jonas is older than me, so I just was born after the war. I was born in 1946. Jonas was born early, during the war. So he's actually had much more traumatic experiences and understand what means hunger and the suffering and the loss, which I didn't have because I was born in the time when was communism building the new country, and it was about after the war enthusiasm and some kind of the determination about let's succeed, let's build things together, about community, about hope. And so in his work, you have reflecting this more than in mine. In my case was different. We was born with the Tito building the country. We was born with the 5-point star communist symbol. And, we was born with the restrictions that for the political joke, you go for 4 years to prison. We knew what we can do and we could not do. And even it was, saying how liberal was, actually was not at all. And we could not just leave the country as we will. And so it was, my reaction was, to rebel all this, to rebel the system and find my own, personal freedom.
Did you watch any of Jonas's diary films?
I watched his movies and what I think that we have to really now think about his archives. I think that probably 80% we still don't know about Jonas. It's so much things that they have to be discovered because it's such a many layers of the content what he was doing. I didn't need to talk to him about it. I didn't need to explain. We both live it. And that's more than enough because there's so many people write about experiences in the books and or talk about experiences. But if you don't have your own personal experience, if you don't make your own journey, then you will never understand what that meant. So to live in the moment is the only reality we have. We can't. We should not look into past, which already happened. I don't need to explain. I just feel it. His films are deeply emotionally. I'm always deeply emotionally touched by his movies and always discover beauty in it. And you really never know where is the next, what takes you to next second. Because it's always, every time you look at the movie, you discover something new, something surprising, and something true. And there is the little things, like a little lizard appears from somewhere and cross the road. And then lizard arrive again, but is now sitting on the rock and taking sunshine. That kind of moments, the simplicity of life. We develop our technology so incredibly complicated that human brain can't follow anymore. But he brings us to simplicity. really to enjoy that moment here and now, again and again, over and over again. I think his work is highly spiritual. Again, we never, as I said, the only time we talk is telling the jokes and doing things together, but not really talking about art because it's so clear. I didn't need to talk about these things. It's, the mystical part is very evident, the ritual part is very evident, because it's something that connects me with him, because we have this inside of us, coming from that kind of world and that part of culture. It's somehow is your DNA. You're born with that. You're born with the idea that there's some kind of extraordinary, invisible world up there, and that you can enter this invisible world if you really focus yourself, your perception into that reality. And that invisible world is visible in his films over and over again. I think if you look at these movies, maybe it's a good point of view that he's an anthropologist, because he actually, how he sees things, how he actually take them apart and how he put them together again, like really anthropologist method. Jonas' work is going to be always be avant-garde, and always will be for smaller amount of people than larger audience. It's made that way. And I think that as the time goes, the new generation is going to discover. And every time, and there's going to be another new generation, because his work is timeless, but it's going to live through the new generation, always young people who will look into it in different ways. This is what I call the work of art who have many lives. And Jonas' work may have many lives to come. In Europe, he's very known. In America, it's always difficult. I mean, it's been always like that. It's in the avant-garde, and especially, art is so easily to become commodity and to cost, millions, and to be seen that way. He was always, on the border of modesty, and art as the most important thing, and not the money, not compromise. Jonas never compromised.
I'm wondering if you could tell me about New York in the late 70s. Like, what was it like? What was Soho like at the time?
First of all, my New York in 70s, it was 3 weeks, New York in 70s. So I can't really talk about, because I came here to stay 3 weeks. It was extremely difficult to leave ex-Yugoslavia at that time, because we didn't have money to travel at all. And getting visa from the communist country and entering America was another nightmare. So I was granted visa of 3 weeks, and I spent here 3 weeks. And I was so hungry for art, for looking things, to see what's going on. Go to every museum, and my perception was this was the center of the world, and the center of the world, the way how the Patti Smith described in the little book Just the Kids, which was so pure in that time, because the art was not seen as a commodity. Art was not having these enormous prices on the art market, and there was no collectors buying for these enormous prices art like now. Everything was so modest and so pure. Somehow artists had to create because they could not live without creating, because it was like breathing the air. You couldn't ask if you have to breathe the air. If you don't breathe, you die. Same, you wake up in the morning and you have new ideas and you have to do it. And that kind of enthusiasm and beauty was here in New York at that time, and poverty in the same time with the artist community. So anybody, in that time that there was I knew Jack Smith at that time. We traveled together in Europe and for some time, and I really, had a more view about, his way working, and John Jonas, and another person who really influenced me the most was John Cage. I traveled to the Micronesia with John Cage in the very interesting project, and then later on, we become friends. And John Cage was somebody who learned me, about things, learned me about, modesty and being thankful and not having huge ego. As ego can be obstacle in your work, and everything was, all the teachings of John Cage was done in me cutting garlic in his kitchen while he was making macrobiotic food. I knew Karlin Schliemann a little bit. I know but in that time, the another people that I met in the early 70s was actually Namjoon Paik and Joseph Beuys, but I didn't meet them in America. I met them in Europe, one in Cologne, in Germany, and Joseph Beuys first time I met in 73 in Edinburgh Festival, and it was the first time that he actually left the German country to go.
Do you know the famous story of Jack Smith and Jonas getting arrested showing flaming creatures? What was Jack Smith like?
He was, bigger than life. So Jack Smith, at that time, there was the art fair in Köln, in Germany, and he was showing his movies, and in the middle of the projection, people was in the room, he would take the match and hold in the front of the projector and start screaming, "The films are burning, this is originals, this is the only film, I don't have it, it's disaster, please stop projection, please stop projection." And everybody was suffering and thinking it's all true. It was all invented by him. And I've been on that projection, and I like it so much, so I started talking to him, and at that time I had a partner working together, Ulay, so we both actually become friends. And then he wanted to come to Amsterdam, and we had a little van, so we said, "Come with us." And he came with his assistant and 3 huge suitcases, and in one suitcase was a life-size stuffed gorilla, and we all sleep in a loft, just on the mats on the floor. It was very, very simple lodging. And I remember that for every single day, Jack Smith would have this gorilla and position him in a certain position, how he would reflect the gorilla and how things would happen per day. And I remember after 5 days being in Amsterdam, one day I wake up and I see the gorilla facing the window, facing the mirror, and with the suitcases packed and the knife in his back. And I was so scared. I said, okay, this is a time I think Jack Smith is about to leave. And he left that day.
There's this other story he tells. You, I think, went to Austria together and you were receiving a medal.
We both, this was unbelievable. I still don't know why, but both of us received the highest cross of the, for the honoring our work achievement in life, which is the ceremony of the president of the country, Austria. It was almost 3 hours, the ceremony. It was the incredibly elaborated, and this is the gold and medal and this huge thing that we wear, both of us, around the neck. And I remember he was so impressed that he was filming all the time, and you're not supposed to film, you're supposed to receive it, the medal. It was a mess. But anyway, we received that very high honor. It was so much ritual and very old Austrian, like in old Austrian-Hungarian fashion. This was incredible. And we was both there, pretty avant-garde artists, never been accepted in that kind of, level. It was the next, oh my God, this with Iceland story, we had lots of good stories. The most famous story that this was Hans Ulrich. So the story of Iceland was crazy. Hans Ulrich was inviting Jonas and inviting me and some other artists to go to Iceland to symposium and talk and propose something. And I was thinking, okay, always these symposiums are so boring. Let's propose something new. So I was thinking, about Dr. Ruth. So Dr. Ruth is when I remember looking television in the 70s, how I was so impressed by this little Jewish Austrian lady talk about sex. And she not only talked the sex, but she was so explicit, talking about masturbation, showing the way how it should be done, say the size doesn't matter, and so on and so on. And for me, it was like my grandmother talk about sex. I'm ashamed looking at her, telling all this story. I remember. Anyway, so she wrote lots of books and so on. So I was thinking she kind of stopped doing TV shows because she's pretty old. She's in her, I think, beginning of 90s or late 80s. So I was thinking, Hans Ulrich, what if we all artists have sexual problems? Why we don't invite Dr. Ruth, and we make the kind of public talk with her? We have a little red telephone next, so the artist will call and tell the sexual problem, and Dr. Ruth will give them the advices. So that could be interesting, kind of change of the symposium and put some humor into it.
I think it's interesting how much Jonas and the people who were kind of leaving after World War II, coming from Europe, changed American culture. I'm just wondering, you also, have done a lot of work here. if there's something that you could fill us in on about the experience of being from like kind of a small country.
The biggest problem with this, especially for the East European people, it's that when they work in their own country, they have to really work with restrictions. And these restrictions they have to create their own rules to break these restrictions. And the work have the power because of the fact they're breaking restrictions. And they have the message, which is very strong. But then, most of the East European people coming out of the countries, going to like in my case, I came out of ex-Yugoslavia into Amsterdam in the 70s, which everything was free. I mean, me being naked in ex-Yugoslavia and cutting my hair and burning in the 5-point star, it was one thing in there. But if I would do the same thing in Amsterdam, nobody cared, because people was there crazy, and there was already complete freedom. So this was really difficult, and many people get lost because of that translation from one restriction to non-restriction situation. So you have to actually find your own way. You have to reinvent yourself in a different way, and create your different type of restrictions that you have to break in the country, which freedom is much bigger. And this is what he done too.
When he passed away, how did you feel?
I know for a while that he was not well, first of all. And just a few days before he passed away, the Hansuli Kobris, who is our mutual friend, told me that he's not doing well. And his son also sent a note. So I was ready. And everybody have expiring date. And I see the life and death in different ways than many other people. I love the Sufi sentence. And I hope that will happen, to me too, that life is a dream and the dead is waking up. And I also like the 3 things that we should also face when we are dying. Not to be angry, not to die in fear, and die consciously. And I feel that with Jonas happened all these things. I think he was very aware of his dying, and I think he was ready for it. And this is a blessing. And we hope this kind of death to everybody.